No, I'm good.
Okay.
It's close by if I need it.
Yep.
You weren't here, so Al had to pour me one down there. Wow. Yeah. I didn't know what to do. Pour my own water.
Watch out. It might be thought of as sexist.
Well, I made Al do it too. So.
You don't read the menu.
I'm just gonna sit here and look at that the whole time. And just,
Last night, we're
I
both
guess
like,
so, yeah.
this is good.
this is fantastic.
I love
Eat
the
it.
order.
It's in the same form of-
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unless you're drinking. But, you know.
Right.
I don't know.
I want them to make some money a little bit. Okay. No, I did not. I did see the application. No, no. I read his VIN numbers. I saw there's 3 vehicles.
Yes.
So I just didn't see the title.
Yeah.
I read it.
I know, are they gonna do it? Yes, they are.
No, next Monday.
I can.
Okay, I'll know more tomorrow.
After, we have cannabis, and she wants to also take Banjago.
Oh,
I don't know what train that would be.
I arrived. Well, you can do it 4:53. Figure at 5:17.
Okay, so I'll
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, that's fine. Maybe we should do that.
Yes.
Take
My
the
only thing. Well, yeah, I'll know more. Then it's
Funded mandates.
Robert.
Ingrid, I thought I would
Won't have a
mention the
Okay.
the Pace Bus
Okay, so
So-
when you
proposal
reply,
to
I'll reply
cut
for-
out
free
that
to say
route.
5:30.
Is that part of your report? Or
No.
Okay.
For our train times. We got a couple.
Who's this?
Really?
Public Works?
But
Public
like,
Works?
hey, now that I
There's a new. You guys ready to start? Okay, here we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this first October meeting of your Board of Trustees. To honor our nation's heroes and especially to honor the men and women in uniform who serve and protect our community, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk Horvath, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Madam President. Trustee Chen.
Here.
Trustee Fink.
Here.
Trustee John.
Here.
Trustee Rudolph.
Here.
Trustee Sifferman.
Here.
And Trustee Terrell.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Having read the agenda, does any trustee have an addition or deletion to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to the portion of the meeting where we open it up to citizen comments. This is your opportunity to address the board. We do ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes so that everyone who wants to speak has an opportunity to do so. Is there anyone in the audience tonight who wishes to address the board? Yes, sir. Please state your name for us.
Jerry Olszewski on Western Avenue, resident for 41 years. The subject is the bridge,
Okay.
the walk bridge, although it should be called the bicycle bridge.
You're talking about the pedestrian bridge
That is
over the
correct.
tollway?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
All right. The bridge has been there for a prime reason years ago, and the prime reason was because the eastern of Hinsdale belonged to our school district. Well, that is long gone. Our school board decided to let them out of our district. That was the main reason. I live on Western Avenue. All the kids came across there for Laidlaw School and for Lyons Township, and they stood by the bus there. So there's really no real reason for having that bridge right now. Number two, we don't take care of the bridge on our side, on the shrubbery on the sides. I call, I'm the only one that probably calls nagging about this, okay? The other thing is, all the graffiti and everything, and over the years, probably the last 30 years, I've called the police on evenings when cars pull up, park in front of my house, and they go over there by the bridge, right by the wall on the north side, and smoke weed. They're doing beer, all kind of things. And this has gone on for years, and I've called the police over and over. There was one time last year where 2 carloads pulled up of guys, teens, went over there. I called the police came. They got them all out of there. They were not, their parents were not even notified. All they did was check their IDs, and they found nothing, so they just let them all go. So there's like no rule of law anymore.
Well, I'm sure our police department upholds the law when they have reason to do so, but
Like years ago, the police would notify at least the parents, hey, your child was somewhere where they shouldn't have been. That's not public property for them just to walk through. And the neighbors on that side of the street that back up to that, some of them have young children that go to Laidlaw. And they're very concerned about that too. They were shagging people out of there. So as far as I'm concerned, they can move that bridge over to the park, the Spring Rock Park. That would be fine with me.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board this evening? Mr. Vespine said, this man had his hand up before, thank you.
My name's David Lottie. I live at 3830 Howard, over 30 years.
Welcome.
I regularly use that pedestrian bridge where it exists now. I understand this man's concerns about issues, but I know we have a pedestrian tunnel over here that's much better lighted and has video cameras, so I would suggest something would be considered for this bridge. But I regularly use it. I appreciate where it is now. It's in the center. To get to the park, to connect the parks, I don't understand why 47th Street is out of the question, the 47th Street overpass. And honestly, I think we sort of squandered an opportunity to build a pedestrian component to the new BNSF bridge. But again, I regularly use this bridge where it is. It's easy access to Whole Foods. My doctor is over at Elman York. I'm a big walker. And it's centrally located, so there's that bridge, there's 47th Street, and then there's the tunnel underneath the tollway in Bemis Woods. So again, you know, I think nothing of walking the Oak Brook Library. I've walked Oak Brook Mall, but that bridge where it is really handy. I understand you want to do some switchbacks on there. I ride my bike over it. I don't know what a switchback would do. It would just prolong the pumping up to one side, but that's fine. But you know, to address his concerns, maybe some cameras and better lighting would be appropriate. But again, I am a heavy user of that pedestrian bridge, and I appreciate where it is now.
Well, thank you for your comments. The switchbacks are to bring the bridge into ADA compliance,
Yeah, I
and so
realize that.
it's
It just makes it
required.
a
It sure
longer
does.
pump.
Yeah. You would
Okay.
not be in favor of it moving to 47th Street then?
No, seriously, there's the 47th Street. I mean, improve the sidewalks and, you know, maybe do a switchback down from the sidewalks to each of the parks. I mean, it's already there. And like I said, they're building this brand new bridge for the Burlington. You know, I've seen railroad bridges with pedestrian, like, off to the side, so I don't know why we couldn't have done that. But that's probably gone. But where the bridge is now, it's really well located. So
Okay.
I don't think, in Spring Rock Park, you know, to address his concerns, you know, after night, my God, I can't imagine the parties that would happen at the end of that bridge in Spring Rock Park after dark. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Vespa, thank you for your patience.
Mike Vespa, 906 Linden Court. I wanted to ask the committee this evening if you would be willing to entertain citizens' comments between agenda items 6 and 7 this evening as it relates to the small wireless design and facilities, in order to hear that update from this group and then be able to ask any questions or clarifications regarding it.
I think that would be appropriate if no one here has any objection. I was going to pull General Government Committee report up, just behind the Public Health and Safety report, so that we wouldn't have to, keep everybody here to the very end.
My ask is just before you go forward with discussion of the resolution itself, which is agenda item 7,
Right?
if there could just be an opening for public comments after the general government update, but before that resolution's brought forward.
Sure. You
Okay.
might have to remind me, but
Fair enough.
let's
Thank you
do
very
that.
much.
Okay. So we'll withhold comments on the small cell facility guidelines and or resolution until after General Government Committee has made their presentation. Are there other comments not related to the small cell facilities? Yes, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Gretchen Kulat. I'm a resident of Western Springs for 20 years now with my husband. We live at 1415 Walnut Street. And not to echo too much of what's been said already, but I'm here about the pedestrian bridge.
Okay.
I too am a very much regular user of it, as are my children, my family members. I would say it's safe to say that besides the dead of winter, there's not a week that goes by that we don't use it multiple times. I would also say it is a thoroughfare for walkers, joggers, pedestrians in general, commuters, some that work at Whole Foods or in Hinsdale, or people running errands, as the gentleman before me mentioned. And I too am very content with where it is. I understand that there needs to be adaptations to make it up to code. But unfortunately, by nature of where we are in Western Springs, we're very, very confined. When trying to get to Hinsdale, your options are basically Ogden, which is death-defying on anything other than a vehicle, and even then, it's also dangerous sometimes. And 47th, and that was also mentioned that bridge is also not safe, and there is no
Right.
pedestrian area there. So, as at risk of losing it, I think people would be content with it being near Spring Rock, although I think since the structure sort of is as it is, it might be better just to keep it where it is and add the necessary additions. I will say that after I read the articles that have been posted recently in the Tribune and Patch, I was a little frustrated that I've read that Hinsdale has shown drafts of the bridge or possibilities, and none of the Western Springs residents that have contacted me, and I've had dozens, know anything about it or the possibilities. So I'd like to urge more communication with the
Okay.
residents, or a survey perhaps, to see who would prefer what. I don't know if we have that much of a say with the tollway authority, but just more open communication I will really, really appreciate.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you. Did you have your hands raised, Alex? No. Okay. Thank you.
I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to mention that we do have a presentation from the Tollway. They are here tonight. We, together, the Village of Hinsdale and the Village of Western Springs, decided that we would propose this in October. Their meeting was earlier than ours. We had a Properties and Recreation Committee meeting earlier this month where we discussed it, and the designs were available at that time. We have also been discussing the fact that this is going to happen since about 2 years now. So we have been discussing this, that we knew that the bridge would be taken down. So it will be taken down completely. It will not look the same at all because we have the switchbacks on both sides, more severely on the Hinsdale side. just so you know that it's not going to be the same, and they will have to clear out that entire area in the back there to do the switchback. So, but as you can see from the presentation that the tollway will have later on this evening, the confinement of the area there, so.
Okay, thank you. And I did want to mention that the board has addressed this issue off and on over the past year or so, but now is the time to come to a decision and a consensus. So that's why it's more in the limelight now, but we will continue to try to improve our communications too. Anyone else? Yes.
So, my name is Mike Plitka, I'm 4146 Hampton. So, we are also regular users of that pedestrian bridge, and again, not to repeat what other people have said, but we are kind of cut off there. It's kind of difficult for our kids. We like to go to the Grotty Mill and those different places that you can go with your family, and we actually ride our bikes there. There's really no option to get there at all if we don't have that pedestrian bridge. And there's already a lot south of the tracks. North of the tracks, that's really the only kind of connection we have towards, towards any of those facilities those like family kind of activities, other than going south of the tracks. So we are kind of cut off. It's actually the reason why I moved north of the tracks. So when I heard that there was a potential for it to be either removed or moved down the Spring Rock, I already feel like there's a lot of family activities south of the tracks. That's really all we have north of the tracks. So just wanted to present that as a possibility if you guys would consider it.
Okay, thank you. We haven't made a decision one way or the other. I do have to say that the 47th pedestrian crossing is not a safe crossing at this time. That would need improvements as well. Yes?
Would it be possible for me to speak on 5G now?
To speak on, if you would like to, certainly. But please come up to the podium. That's where the microphone is, so the people at home can hear you. Oh,
That's okay, I can make it.
oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Heidi Hansen.
Hi.
I'm 4721 Franklin in Western Springs. I've been here for about 25 years now. And I just heard about 3 or 4 days ago that 5G was coming to Western Springs. And I heard about it from someone in Hinsdale. So that kind of surprised me. I would have preferred to hear about it from Western Springs or the newspapers or something closer to home. So first, I'd like to ask for more public outreach on the issue, generally.
Okay.
It's an important issue. From what I understand, in Hinsdale, there'll be an antenna every few blocks. Hinsdale is expecting 140 antennas from Verizon alone, and there are the potential of 4 different companies coming in and each wanting to install their own antennas. It's a different type of radiation than we're used to being exposed to. It will be closer to the ground, and I understand that some of the antennas will be installed on ComEd's easements in utility poles. There is one literally in my backyard, so I'm concerned about this. And in the little bit of reading I've done, there's a lot of indications that it may not be safe, or that at least we don't know that it is unsafe, or at least we can't be sure that it is safe. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, there are concerns, there's a TED Talk on it. It's just something that I'm not comfortable with and I'd like to know more about. I know Western Springs has been referring to it as the small wireless facility, but that just sounds so innocent, that sounds innocuous. That doesn't tell me that we're talking about 5G, which I think most people have heard of. And I know too that Western Springs is working on general guidelines and design standards. Madam
Yes.
President, you were kind enough to send me the general guidelines. I still haven't seen the design standards, but I would like them to be made available to everyone in the village before they're adopted, if that's possible.
I sent you the link to the design, to the guidelines that is now on our website. That is the design standards.
Okay. I see, I was not even aware of that. Because in an earlier board agenda. They're called general guidelines, and then there's another appears to be another document called design standards. So, but I don't want to get too far into those because we're going to be addressing them later, apparently. But I did note that the general guidelines tend to deal mostly with aesthetics. And the link that I sent all the board members is a model ordinance that deals more with health and environmental protection. I'd like to see that considered, if at all possible. One of the concerns with the general guidelines, if I can just throw it out now, is that they can be as close as 12 feet off the ground. And if you have a house with 2 stories, 12 feet off the ground is where your bedroom is. So that also is concerning. But specifically, I'd like to ask that the village not accept permit applications until some health protective guidelines are in place. Now, I do understand that your hands are tied by a state statute, which brings me to point 2. I'd like the village to consider whether or not they would ask that that be amended. It would have been adopted apparently during the Rauner administration. Perhaps the current General Assembly would be more amenable to giving the village more authority over citing these. Last, I'd like to ask that you hold a public meeting and bring experts in to address 2 points. One, the evidence of danger. I'm not capable of reading everything out there and digesting it and telling you whether or not it should be a concern. But since there are indications that it's a concern, I worry. Second, what can we do as a village and as individuals to mitigate that danger? Just been looking on the internet real quickly. There's talk of RFID blankets, EMF meters, and I actually have one of those at home. But what is a reasonable thing to do to address our own safety if and when 5G comes? You know, is it possible to get 5G in my office but not in my bedroom? You know, I don't know enough about how these things work. And so I would ask that the village hold a public meeting, let people talk, and bring in an expert to advise us.
All right, thank you
Thank
for
you.
your comments, appreciate it. I do want to say I did receive your email today, and the second one, I did not have a chance before our meeting to respond to it regarding the fact that the design standards is the same document that I already provided the link to you in a previous email today. But more importantly, we will take your suggestions under advisement. First of all, we don't know whether there is a danger. We presume there isn't because this is something that's been sanctioned by the state and mandated by the state that we have very little control over. And again, these design standards that our attorney has drafted are exactly what we feel we can claw back some control over with regard to the small cell. I think the small wireless facility is a turn of phrase that the state itself used and we adopted, but certainly there was no intent to deceive the public with.
I understand that,
Yeah.
and I strongly suspect that was drafted by the industry. But the village does have the opportunity to explain that small wireless is 5G.
Sure,
So.
yes, thank you.
And one more quick thing I'd like to say is I really haven't had much dealings with the village, but in the last few days I have, and everyone I've talked to has been fast and responsive, and I appreciate that.
Great, thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. Anyone else? Pardon me? Oh, please. Thanks, James.
I'm Al Rocker. I live at 3936 Central. I'm just here to address the footbridge. I'm not going to repeat everything. I think the 2 things that most people on the north side of town feel is confined by Ogden Avenue, the highway. There's like no getting out, and the footbridge is our best way out. So my family uses it daily. Groceries, farmers market, dips and dogs, doesn't matter. My children run over it for summer running, for cross country. There's not a really great safe option otherwise. It would be great to keep it. If there's anything that can be done to just influence the option of just keeping that avenue open would be great. I don't think there's another safe option that I'm aware of. I think when I see the children running over 47th, it's not safe. I do it
Right.
myself, but I go early. It's not a good option. Something has to be done to give us some options. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone? Yes.
Hi, my name is Jerome Genezer, and I had a question on the I-294 bridge location. I was just wondering if you were ever going to talk about the 47th Street Bridge, if you had any other plans, because I'm also kind of really worried a bit about it, because sometimes I cross it too and I realize how unsafe it is for someone to fall into traffic, or because there's just a walkway and there's nothing in between it, and I'm just really kind of concerned about it.
On 47th Street?
Yeah, 47th.
Yeah. I agree that that's not a safe option at this time. And so we're considering either keeping the pedestrian bridge where it is or moving it to the 47th Street option. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you would prefer to move it to 47th Street or?
I wouldn't really. If you keep the pedestrian bridge, that's fine. But if you keep it, that's fine. But I would rather, like personally, if you keep it, that's fine. But if you can maybe at least like have it safer, make it 47th safer, because every time I cross it, I kind of get the worrisome feeling of, hey, I might fall into traffic and die. Or,
Sure.
Yeah.
It's understandable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Is this gentleman here? Good evening.
I'm adding my voice to the people who want to keep the bridge.
May we have your name, please?
My name is Frank Schimmel. I live at 4095 Garden Avenue. I'm at the corner of Garden and Maple, just down the street from the bridge. I've been crossing that bridge since I was in high school. I grew up in Brookfield. I used to ride my bike on the bike path. And I come right past this house I live in now and cross the bridge and then go right over to McDonald's. So I've been crossing that bridge forever. I think you should make a plan to improve 47th Street. There should be a sidewalk there. There shouldn't be that much to do as compared to replacing the walk bridge. And that said, the walk bridge should be there because there's no way in that corner of our town to get across 294 safely as a pedestrian on Ogden Avenue. It's just not possible. And that's all I gotta say.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Good evening.
Elizabeth Slazak, 4317 Prospect. And I'm not going to repeat what everyone else has said about the pedestrian bridge. I was born and raised here, I've used it my whole life. We can't cross at Ogden. Well, that crossing is not safe.
Right.
I've been, seen plenty of near accidents there. 47th Street should be improved. I would like, if it could be considered, to keep it where it is. We already deal with the trains, so to get to 47th Street is often a challenge in and of itself. So in addition to what everyone else has said, we are hemmed in there. The trains also hem us in at times, frequently. So we would appreciate if it would be considered. We use it regularly and have our whole lives.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. You do know there's a pedestrian underpass now going in on the west side that you'll be able to use whether a train's going across or not.
Yes, I guess I'd like to see a good enough reason why it has to be moved from its current location.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to the consideration of the agenda items during our workshop portion of the combined meeting this evening. We're going a little bit out of order today so that we may address the committees that have heard some issues that we believe are of particular importance to our residents. So the first committee to report today will be Public Health and Safety Committee. Trustee Sifferman.
Thank you, Madam President. There are two items that come to this body out of our October 8th Public Health and Safety Committee meeting. Before introducing our discussion on item A, under B, Other, I would like to inform the full board, including you, President Gallagher, as well as the public, that the Public Health and Safety Committee has had the opportunity to review the initial fiscal year 2020 draft budgets submitted by the police and fire departments and found them to be both prudent and appropriate. Both of these drafts reflected compliance with budget directions offered by Finance Director Grace Turi and Village Manager Ingrid Velkme. The committee stands ready to review the final versions in the context of the entire village budget prior to any board approval.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce our discussion this evening on two state legislative acts dealing with medical and recreational cannabis that our body must deliberate and act upon by December 31st, 2019. The Public Health and Safety Committee has considered this topic in the context of a whole galaxy of public health and safety implications. We've listened to public comments offered by health and educational advocates within the committee, and were treated to a comprehensive PowerPoint presentation on this subject by Village Attorney Mike Jarusik. I've asked Mike to put all of us on the same page here this evening regarding the legislation, the options before the board that we must act upon, and strategies that we should consider before taking any appropriate action. So Mike, I would ask you to share with us and the audience the context of your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Trustee Sifferman. Can everybody hear me? We have two cannabis acts or regulations that in Illinois that we have to deal with going forward as residents, communities, law enforcement, health services. First act is the Illinois Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Program Act that was enacted in 2013, effective in 2014. It allows for the sale and use of cannabis for medical purposes. For eligible medical patients can use cannabis for various ailments and treatments. Earlier this year, the Illinois legislature adopted the other law, the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, and what that allowed, we're the 11th state in the union to have recreational marijuana to be legal. So the other 10 states all enacted or allowed for recreational use by referendum. We're the first state to allow it through the legislative process. So for us, we really have two tasks at hand. We have to really think about regulating medical cannabis dispensaries because the law was changed this August to make them more prevalent in communities. They reduced distance regulations. And then we, as Trustee Sifferman said, the medical or the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act that allows for recreational cannabis use, that becomes effective January 1, 2020. So we have to sort of get our ducks lined up in a row in order to regulate that product. What we're looking at, if you can see the PowerPoint, this is really what the cannabis industry is. It has become big business. It is big grow houses, cultivation centers of up to 18,000 square feet under roof, craft growers, smaller under roof facilities of 3,000 to 18,000 square feet. Those are allowed, throughout the state. And then the dispensaries themselves are, they're really retailers. They are, similar to, a drugstore. For us, the policy considerations are really twofold. We have to take another look at the Medical Cannabis Act because of some of the changes the state legislature made it this past August that made it easier to locate medical cannabis dispensaries in communities. So, before the old law had certain distance regulations that, given the way that those facilities were regulated, there was really no likelihood that a medical cannabis dispensary could open up in the village of Western Springs because the distance requirements from residential areas, from schools, and the like were so stringent that we did not have any reasonable likelihood for a medical cannabis dispensary to open up. Same thing with the cultivation centers. Those distance requirements still apply, though, to cultivation centers, so it's highly unlikely that we'll have a cultivation center open up in Western Springs. But I still recommend that we review our zoning code. You have to allow medical cannabis dispensaries to open up. The state law is very specific that you cannot prohibit them. You have to allow them, at least theoretically, to exist somewhere in your community. And so we really need to update our zoning code, make them an allowed use. My recommendation is we treat them as a special use, which would give us greater zoning flexibility and put regulatory conditions on their use, and also provide for cultivation centers and craft growers as special use. I think that's important too. We may never have one, the cultivation center, because the distance requirements are such that they, couldn't locate in our community. But just like the state legislators got rid of the distance requirements for medical cannabis dispensaries, they could change the law on us, with respect to cultivation centers, and then we would sort of be naked without any regulation in our code. You are allowed to adopt reasonable zoning regulations regarding location and operation. So that's something that, I'm recommending that staff work on in the next couple months. We have a zoning hearing, and then we come back before the end of the year with some regulations to deal with the medical cannabis operations. The other policy considerations relate to the Recreational Cannabis Act. And, with respect to this act, we have an opt-out, opt-in option. Municipalities around Illinois can decide, do they want recreational cannabis to be sold in their community or not? You need to make that decision really by December 31st, 2019, in order to, implement regulations to deal with it. Another way of dealing with the opt-in, opt-out question would be to do a moratorium, and do a community survey or an advisory referendum. If we were to do an advisory referendum, we would need to, if we want to get the referendum on the March 17th, 2020 general primary election, we would need to adopt a resolution in December, have it filed by the end of December, and it would get on that election. If we wanted to wait until the November 30th, the general election, we would be looking at adopting a resolution in August and filing it by mid-August. That's really a policy decision on how you want to go with that, but those are common ways that other municipalities in and around the Chicago metropolitan area are dealing with it. Some have already gotten to the opt-in decision and have set forth, updated both their business regulations and their zoning regulations to provide for recreational cannabis dispensaries and regulating them mostly by special use, and adopting reasonable zoning regulations to regulate them beyond what the state statute has for regulations. The others that have decided to opt out, you adopt an ordinance that amends your business code and amends your zoning code to specifically state that you're opting out, that you prohibit those type of establishments. And then updating our employment policies and labor contracts. I'm not going to really go into a deep dive there, but we have to do that as a staff level, and we've had meetings about that, and my office, village staff, along with Labor Council, will work on those things. So those are really the policy decisions for us in a nutshell, sort of teed up for us. Mm-hmm. Let me give you a little background quickly on the two acts. As I mentioned, the Medical Cannabis Act, it was enacted in August of 2013, effective January 1, 2014. The whole medical cannabis industry is regulated by the Illinois Department of Agriculture and the Department of Financial and Professional Services. Registered qualified patients, those are the folks that are going to be able to use medical marijuana. There are cultivation centers, dispensaries, distributors. There's a whole industry that's been created. Right now, there's 56 authorized dispensaries, 20 cultivation centers statewide. There's a sales tax, 7% sales tax per ounce on cultivating medical cannabis that is sold. The proceeds go into a certain fund to deal with regulation. The taxes, there are also, the municipalities will be able to collect local retail sales tax just like you do, at Walgreens. So there's a stacking of tax. So we have local sales tax. If there are medical cannabis establishment selling in our community, we will see some tax revenue. This act is very specific. It preempts municipal regulatory authority in regard to prohibiting the ability to have a medical cannabis disbursement facility within our borders. We can only regulate by reasonable zoning regulations, special use permits, zoning district, et cetera. The state mandate is that these types of medical cannabis dispensaries need to be geographically dispersed to allow registered qualified patients reasonable proximity and access to dispensing organizations. So that's why they spread them around the state, and they've made it clear that they do not want communities to prohibit them. Cultivation, it's now allowed in private residence by medical cannabis patients. You may have heard as the Recreational Act was making its way through Springfield, there was going to be a home grow option that anybody could home grow. Well, that part of the other act was carved out, and what they did is, what they left in is they now allow medical cannabis patients or their caregivers to grow up to 5 marijuana plants in their house. In order to do it, there's a whole litany of security that you have to go through, but there is no more home grow for everyone in Illinois. The only folks that are allowed to home grow are medical cannabis patients, and even if the village opts out of the recreational cannabis, program, if you do have medical cannabis patients in our community, they will be able to home grow. The other thing is, you will still be able to smoke cannabis, eat, edibles that are infused with cannabis, all types of cannabis products within Western Springs, even if the local community, even if this board decides to opt out. It will be legal for adults over, 21 and over to possess and to use medical cannabis, not medical cannabis, recreational cannabis throughout the state. There are, as we'll touch upon, limitations on how much you can, possess at any given time, but and you can't use it in public. But you will. The home grow component is only limited to medical cannabis patients. As I mentioned, there were some distance requirements. As I touched on, cultivation centers. There's a 2,500 lineal foot distance requirement from residential areas, group homes, schools, etc. The 1,000-foot regulation that used to apply to medical cannabis dispensaries is gone now. That was legislatively removed on August 9th. Let's see, medical cannabis use, it's no longer a pilot program. One of the things that happened in this August 9th legislation that's important to realize is that there are now more medical conditions that qualify people to use medical cannabis. Things such as chronic pain, migraines, osteoarthritis. Also, it went from doctors providing medical scripts to get medical cannabis, to now it's a certified healthcare professional, which can include physician assistants. So the scope of who can use it and the reasons for use has been expanded. And then we touched upon this. We're the 11th state legally authorized private use and possession for adults 21 years and over. There's an opt-out, opt-in provision for us to decide. We may enact an opt-out ordinance, as I indicated, or we can enact a regulation that significantly limits cannabis establishments. We cannot prohibit home cultivation, home grow by medical cannabis patients. We also cannot unreasonably prohibit the use of cannabis as allowed by the Act. The village can allow sales by dispensaries or, either by zoning district, hours of operation, proximity to schools, parks, churches, sensitive uses. We can prohibit in residential areas. We can limit the number of total dispensaries. And also all dispensaries, whether they're medical dispensaries, medical cannabis dispensaries, or recreational cannabis dispensaries, there is a 1,500-foot separation requirement in the state law. So you can't have, there has to be separation. You won't have a bunch of them, if they get state licenses all, lined up next to each other. There is also this concept in the law that allows for the cannabis cafes or lounges. And that is an exemption to both the smoke-free Illinois law and the part of the act that says that you can't use recreational cannabis in public. If the municipality wants to allow a cafe, a cannabis cafe lounge, so you can buy it at the dispensary and you can smoke it or ingest or eat edibles on site, that's allowed if the community decides to go that route. We have a litany of state restrictions on advertising. They all track the tobacco industry. You can't advertise cannabis within 1,000 feet of schools, playgrounds, hospitals, healthcare centers, rec centers, parks, libraries, etc. There's a whole host of regulations that deal with the type of advertising. They cannot be marketed to kids. The Joe Cool type campaign that was really big with cigarettes. So that's all regulated quite tightly. The state did enact 12 restrictions on cannabis dispensaries. And just to go through a few of them, they restrict hours of operation. Uber can't deliver, so that's out. You can't have drive-throughs. There's a significant amount of security that has to be engaged and active on site, and if it's not, the establishment can't operate. There always has to be at least 2 people on premises when the facility is open and dispensing. There's strict packaging and labeling. There's a strict inventory of a state database for all cannabis that's grown around the state. It will be inventoried and dispersed and then tracked through the sales process. Prohibited activities under the Recreational Cannabis Act. You cannot smoke any type of cannabis in a public place where you could be reasonably expected to be observed by others, in a healthcare facility, or any other place where smoking is prohibited. Public place includes being outdoors and in public buildings. Private residence is not a public place unless it's used for child care, foster care, or social services. Driving while under the influence is illegal. The regulations track DUI, so you can't use a motor vehicle or any other type of vehicle that you are not allowed to operate while under the influence of alcohol. Same applies for under the influence of cannabis. Cannot sell cannabis by vending machines. Possession limits: people that are 21 years or older can possess up to 30 grams of the cannabis flower, 15 milligrams or less of THC in cannabis-infused products, 5 grams of cannabis product in a concentrated form. For folks that are non-residents of Illinois, those possession thresholds are lower. Anybody under 21 that is possessing will be subject to arrest. We talked about home grow. The regulatory structure is exactly what the liquor industry, how they operate. Our cultivation centers are your big breweries and distilleries. Your craft growers are your microbreweries and distillers. Your dispensaries are your Walgreens and Binnies. And DUI is the same or very similar structure to DUI with alcohol. There's a whole host of taxation. I mean, that's the whole reason this is now on us. I think the state has viewed this as an opportunity to pay past bills, and that's included in the state tax ladder that they have come up with. Essentially, there's about 45% tax on the recreational cannabis product, most of it going to the state. Up to 3% coming back to the local municipality, up to 3% going to the county Most of it goes back to the state in one way or another. Some of that tax revenue does come back possibly to local municipalities for crime prevention programs, law enforcement training, through what's called a local government distributive fund. That's 8% of the sales tax that's generated. But most of the state tax will go to the state to pay for regulation, funding of programs and training and job training in the cannabis industry, and about 10% of the revenue is allocated or earmarked to pay past due bills, where the state is significantly behind on paying vendors. There's the revenue sharing. We talked about that. That gives you an idea of kind of the breakdown. There's a whole cannabis business development fund, which is to fund businesses and, in particular, businesses in socially challenged and economically deprived areas in the state that have been impacted by the drug war. So there's a whole host of financing that will be set aside for that. As I indicated, DUIs will be addressed by law enforcement the same way as alcohol. Expungements, you may have heard, there's a whole expungement program for low-level cannabis convictions that predate the act. Employment issues, in a nutshell, the act does say that employee workplace safety will not be diminished. Employer workplace policies will be interpreted broadly to protect employee and worker safety. Off-duty use is regulated. There is a right to privacy in the workplace. Cannabis will now be a legal product, so people will be able to use it legally, but there will be certain types of employees, that will not be able to use it. If you're on call, if you're a firefighter, if you're a police officer, if you have a CDL driver's license, or public works officers, employees, there will be, employment issues that are not answered today, but will be, worked out through either court decisions or more legislation. But, rest assured that employers may adopt reasonable employment policies. We're allowed to adopt reasonable zero tolerance and drug-free workplace policies and maintain those. We're able to discipline and terminate employees who violate those policies. We're not required to allow people to work under the influence of cannabis. And then here's just a quick listing of some communities in our area that have existing medical dispensaries. You can see and where they're located. Some are located in industrial parks, some in major retail corridors, high traffic areas. Others are located adjacent to residential neighborhoods. You can see those communities. And here's just a list of the states and gives you an idea of how many licenses per population are issued in the other states that do allow recreational cannabis. There are a whole host of health concerns. And part of the state taxation program does set aside money to deal with abuse, addiction, et cetera. There are going to be health care and liability insurance costs that need to be addressed, both for public employers and private employers. Testing for impairment is really, is up in the air. Law enforcement, the State Police Chiefs Association came out against this law, due in part to the fact that there is no blood alcohol content, testing, no breathalyzer, analysis similar to what they have on the alcohol side to deal with this. But it's here, and the technology is going to have to play catch up. And then the last comment is beware of the cannabis gummy bear. The bottom line is there have been more, overdoses, more both adult, children, and pet-related deaths and health incidents over these edibles. And if you read around, Colorado, Oregon, Canada, the edibles are really, it's dangerous because they hit you at later. It's not like smoking. All the medical, doctors say that it can take up to 3 hours for the edibles to really give you the high that you're looking for. And a lot of times, the anecdotal evidence is people that eat edibles leave it out, accessible to kids and pets, and it can create a big impact health-wise. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm here for questions. Staff, we are going to come back with, a couple ordinances, one to deal with medical cannabis, because we have to update our zoning and business code to deal with that. The other ordinance will either be an opt-out or an opt-in, based on your direction. And so,
Thanks, Mike. The Public Health and Safety Committee will continue to track this and work together with you and the village staff to come up with recommendations for the action for the board to take. We felt that it was important for this subject matter to bring everybody up to speed based on our understanding of the present act and the act that will go into effect January 1. But the timetable and our options according to that need to be addressed, and we'll report on that the next time we have that opportunity.
and I think it's safe to say that, surrounding communities, it's a mixed bag as to, whether communities are opting in, opting out. There is no, kind of playbook that everybody's following. People are making determinations and making decisions, for their own communities. Some boards are split. Some communities are, that are opting in are placing them on Main Street. They want the foot traffic. They don't mind the visibility. Some communities that are opting in are putting them in industrial and manufacturing districts to put them on the border of their communities, closer to their neighbors and out of sight from their Main Street. So, and then other communities are opting out altogether. So, it's really it's a unique and it's a local decision for each community to make, because it has its own impacts. And, when you look around, different communities are doing things differently, and we will bring back, and we've done so actually in some of our materials, kind of a menu of what other communities are doing and the options that they're selecting. And, we'll make sure you have every option available to you to make an informed decision.
Well, this is just another example of the benefit of local government or organization to be able to address the issues that come to us from the state, and that we have an opportunity to respond to that and adjust it according to the values that of those individuals we represent.
Mike, I had a question. You put a lot of facts out there. Right now, I understand that because of the distance with the recreational, we're not going to have anything here. But we'd have an opt-out out in the event that the distance is pulled. Although the health, the medical, we have to have that in as well as home use.
Yeah, we definitely have to have, to zone for the medical cannabis establishment. The distance requirement for the medical cannabis establishment, it used to be 1,000 feet from residential areas, schools, daycares and the like. That's now gone. So that's where we can enact reasonable regulations to have them locate somewhere in our community. On the recreational side, the only distance requirement for recreational cannabis dispensaries is the fact that if we have more than one in our community, or if we have put one near our border and there's another one, they can't be less than 1,500 feet from each other. So there is no
There's no distance requirement for recreational.
No.
That's where we'd have the policy.
Other than the 1,500 foot separation from them.
That's where we'd have the opportunity, either opt out, opt in, or referendum to get the pulse of the villagers.
And that would be one way to take
Okay.
the pulse of the community if you wanted to. Some communities are enacting a moratorium ordinance, which typically are legally good for 6 to 9 to 12 months. It gives you an opportunity to study an issue. Moratorium ordinances they basically put a freeze on your zoning and your business regulations for a particular issue for further study. So that's what would happen. You would enact if you want to go down that path, we would enact a moratorium ordinance sometime before the end of the year with an express finding that you're going to revisit the opt-in, opt-out issue after either a community survey or an advisory referendum is placed on one of the election.
March would be the
March would be the earliest one to have that decision made.
When would the referendum language have to be presented?
We would have to get that approved by December of this year, so we can get you that, referendum language here at any time.
Mike,
There's
in your,
also, excuse me, there's also the November election, which I was favoring if we go that route with the moratorium and the referendum, because that gets just in general more people to the polls to vote, and then we would have a larger
Moratorium until November.
representation until November,
Okay.
putting the advisory referendum on the November ballot. But March, of course, is an option for us too, if we so choose.
So that would be our decision by December 31st, is we would not be acting on the opt-in or opt-out. We would just say we are putting it on the November ballot.
Right,
correct?
so, right, it's a policy decision. We can choose to opt in, opt out, or adopt a moratorium for a decision at a later date. We do have to make a decision, and Mike says the moratorium really has to be, it's a short-term solution, so no longer than a year.
so
But
that would just toll the.
that would
any-
toll our
yeah,
action
okay.
until
Right.
that time.
Mike,
That
I had a question, I'm sorry. Mike, I had a question. In your research, has your research uncovered any steps that are being taken by the medical review community over those individuals, the medical professionals that are in charge or that register qualified patients for this? Are they going to step up their game in terms of any review of the practices of the medical profession over this?
Yeah, I haven't come across any type of, study or information in that regard. The only information I have with respect to the medical cannabis, the regulatory end of it is this April 9th legislation that expanded the number of qualifying conditions or criteria to receive medical cannabis, and also that the person who can write the script, the prescription to get medical cannabis, that has been expanded from just a medical doctor to, like I said, it's a qualified medical professional, which can be a physician's assistant.
And they would be subject to review by
They're
the
state
authority?
bodies, yeah, they're
Okay.
certifying and state regulatory bodies, yes.
Thanks.
And just quick clarification, I think this is an easy one. The dispensaries, it has to be its own unique business, meaning you can't add a dispensary into an existing business. So for example, Casey's can't decide that they want to be a dispensary. Okay.
Right. The way the dispensary licenses work, the state has planned to, they've issued X number of medical cannabis dispensary licenses. Those medical cannabis dispensaries have first option to pick up a recreational cannabis license, so they could be a dual facility. And then there will be a whole host of additional recreational cannabis licenses issued, and in two waves over the course of a couple years. And those dispensaries, they can't sell alcohol, they can't sell other products. They are going to be basically retailers of either medical cannabis products or cannabis products.
Okay, or the cafe lounge kind of thing.
Or if the community allows them, they'll have edibles, infused products. There's a whole host of ointments and lotions and all of that. So there's a whole range of products that these establishments will be authorized to sell.
Okay, that was my easy question. My second one is more about the sales tax. Are there any estimates? I know there are the macro estimates of the sales tax that would be generated from the industry as a whole for the state. Are there any estimates of what that means in terms of like per 10,000 people, or any way for us to gauge what the sales tax impact to us could be?
I haven't seen anything broken down on a per capita basis. I've just seen gross aggregate numbers, which of course are very rosy.
Yeah.
The one thing that I haven't seen is an adjustment in the state's numbers to account for the fact that they just expanded a whole host of eligible criteria and conditions for medical cannabis. And if you remember from the chart, the medical cannabis is taxed 7%, from the cultivator, and then it has a state tax, which is going to be, a low end, a few percentage points, right? On the other side, you have recreational cannabis is going to be taxed up to 45%. you know, and provided the county and the local municipalities each go up to 3%, you're talking 45% tax. I spoke on a panel a couple weeks ago, and one of the things that is interesting is there is at least a thought, at least from law enforcement. One of the police chiefs, that's the chief of the State Chiefs Association, he felt that he believes, and the law enforcement believe, that the black market is not going to go away, that the black market will come and undercut, pricing, right? The other thing that I think we talked about that I think is an interesting concept is with it becoming more easy to become eligible for medical cannabis, there's really a disincentive to buy recreational cannabis and buy product that's taxed at 45% when it seems that being eligible for medical cannabis, if you have chronic pain, right, migraines, and that was to Trustee Sifferman's point, if you can find a doctor or a health professional that can write you a script for medical cannabis, it's going to be far cheaper from a sales tax standpoint to buy medical cannabis. So that may ultimately skew the state's numbers depending on where purchases are made, right, from which side of the dispensary, medical cannabis versus recreation.
So there's no option, I'm sorry, Heidi, there's no option for the municipality to add on the 3% tax to the medical side of it? Okay.
No, the only thing you can do is stack whatever existing sales tax. So if we were a home rule community and we had a local home rule sales tax, that would get stacked onto the regular retail occupation tax, but you're not able to increase the tax burden. Home rule is preempted. We're not a home rule community, so whatever state taxes apply to the medical cannabis, we'll get our share. And then we do have, on the recreational cannabis side, we will get all of our state sales taxes, plus we have the ability to enact a 3% cannabis tax. So we will have the potential to, earn an extra 3% of sales tax over and above our local sales tax on the recreational cannabis product sales.
Of the other 10 states that have already enacted this, do they have a similar tax distinction between medical and recreational?
I haven't looked at them that closely, other than when I've looked at the other states, I've really looked at them more from a law enforcement standpoint and a regulatory scheme. I haven't really focused on the local sales tax end of it. Yeah.
I'm sure there's some, at this point, there must be some data out there that we'd be able to, just on the per capita question.
I'm sure, and we can chase that down. We can get that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Any other questions of Mike?
That completes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Sifferman. Quite a report. Thank you. Moving on to the General Government Committee report, Trustee Terrell.
Thank you. The first item on the general government is the application by Guac and Taco liquor license request. The applicants are here. They'd like to address us, but just by way of introduction, they're bringing their restaurant. They've already started the construction of it at where Solstice used to be. They are experienced restaurateurs. They have 2 other locations in the western suburbs. They're hoping to open in November because they are hoping also to have outdoor liquor consumption and also full-service patron use inside of the restaurant. They are going to need a Class B and a Class H liquor licenses. It's coming in front of the Liquor Commission on October 21st. It will presumably be in front of us in 2 weeks, but since the applicants have waited here patiently, perhaps, would you like to address us about your restaurant?
Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Alex Fuentes, and we're here on behalf of Walking Tacos. We are excited of opening up our new restaurant here in Western Springs. Like the gentleman said, it's our 3rd location. We have one in Elmhurst and one in Downers Grove. Mainly it's tacos, what we're going to be serving. There's the variation of tacos that will be served. And we're looking to obtain the liquor license mainly for beer. There's not gonna be a bar, it's gonna be for the outside patio. It's gonna be close to 8 tables and 12 tables inside. It's gonna be served. Basically, that's it. I don't know if there's any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? We're very excited to welcome you to our
Welcome.
community. And we wish you a lot of success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That did come before our commission. We wholeheartedly thought that it should go forward.
Thank you.
The second item was the 2020 public meeting notice. It's self-explanatory. As a housekeeping member, this does have to be published so that the villagers can know when to come to our public meetings. It is, I think it's the second and fourth Mondays of every month, with the exception of August, which is just going to be 1 month. It can all be read by you, and so that you'll know when we're going to meet. The next housekeeping matter is the refuse and recycling update. Because we are changing our vendors, we have a 5-year contract now with Lakeshore, and it's going to involve carts rather than bringing the blue bags out to the street and garbage bags. We're going to have to change our ordinance for refuse and recycling to comport with the contract that we're going to have with Lakeshore. So that's a work in progress. We'll probably have the ordinance drafted out sometime in November. Again, it's going to mirror the contract that we'll have with Lakeshore, so the residents can know when they can bring the carts out, when they have to come back, things of that nature. The next item I have, Mike's already spoken quite a bit today, but I'm going to have to call him for the 5G small cell legislation. We had some comments from villagers already this evening, but Mike, perhaps you could address us as to the ethics ordinances which are coming forward for our discussion, in fact, later on tonight.
Sure. What we have tonight is a resolution to adopt the written design standards for small wireless facilities. This is basically putting in the villages. It's really, they're called, and I know there was some question of where they design standards, but the title of the document is General Guidelines in Small Wireless Facility Design, Stealth, and Concealment Standards. These are really a set of comprehensive regulations that a local municipality can enact given the statute, both state law and federal law, that are out there. We just do not have at the local level really a whole host of police powers, zoning regulations, the type of regulations that we are typically left with, to govern in our own community. We are, our hands are tied to some extent. I think President Gallagher indicated that based on the legislation that we are handed. And I think it's important to realize that these guidelines and design standards, they give us the maximum control that we have in this situation. And if you don't adopt them, we have a couple, national cell companies knocking on our door, interested in filing a permit. If we don't get something on the books that takes us as far as we can under this state act, they will be able to build out their infrastructure in our community with no regulation, with no controls whatsoever. These regulations can be amended at a future date if the state law changes. But without adopting these, we really are powerless to put any brakes or to put any, regulations in place. And why is that? Because, the big cell companies, they went across 50 states and got the same legislation passed in Springfield across the other 49 states. This was an orchestrated event that they were successful in lobbying and pushing through the state legislatures. The Illinois Municipal League, which lobbies and defends and goes to bat for local municipalities, objected to this vehemently, and it all fell on deaf ears. One of the things that I will say is the small wireless facilities, if you guys are not happy with the legislation, it's not the legislators up here, it's not our local legislators, it's really the sponsors of the bill, you know, that you really need to contact because, and we can give you those sponsors of the bill. I have them here. And it's nobody local, I can tell you that. It got passed, we're stuck with it. Within that act, what we have here is a set of regulations that takes us as far as we can go. The regulations, this isn't the first time the board is considering this. We've had multiple public meetings where we've discussed these guidelines. They've been vetted by staff, they've been vetted by my office. We've been, actually, Mike Mars, one of my partners, has spoken around the state.
And here.
And actually here earlier in the summer, he had probably a 45-minute presentation, a Q&A. So we've had multiple public kind of vettings of these guidelines. And we're at a point where we just have to move forward tonight. That's our recommendation because we are holding off, you know, at least one cell tower company that wants to file a permit. And if it gets filed, your regulations, you can't apply them after the fact. For the folks that aren't familiar with the general guidelines, you know, we are regulating and enacting standards that will deal with design, aesthetics, stealth, concealment standards. We are going to deal with small wireless facilities and where they can be located. We are going to deal with the replacement of existing street light poles. There may be opportunities for the community to get more street lighting in different parts of the community at the cost of, you know, the cell carriers as part of rolling out this program. We have a number of regulations that deal with stealth and concealment requirements. We have a number of regulations that deal with limitations on historic district and historic landmark regulations. With respect to the health safety issue, let me just address this, and we will post this on the village's website. You know, as I mentioned, it's a state act that we're stuck dealing with, but it's also, we also have to comply with a federal law, the Communications Act of 1934. And here's what that provision says. It limits our authority over radio frequency emissions, and I know that's what a lot of people have concerns about, that, you know, these cell phones, don't put it too close to your head because, right, radio, you know, frequency emissions, you know, can impact your, you know, can have the potential to impact your health. Well, the federal law says that, and this, I'm going to quote this is, no state or local government or instrumentality thereof may regulate the placement, construction, or modification of personal wireless service facilities on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the Commission's regulations concerning such emissions. And I also have a link to the FCC, that's the regulatory body that we have to comply with as well in this case. They have a radio frequency safety FAQ, a white paper that we will have posted on the village's website. And they go through, you know, questions such as, you know, does radio frequency radiation cause cancer? Can people be exposed to levels of radio frequency radiation that could be harmful? They address the local municipal regulation and clearly point out that the local municipalities are preempted from regulating in this area. We cannot base our siting decision on any antenna, you know, based on radio frequency emissions. So we will provide that information. We'll get it up on the website for everybody to, you know, digest. We will, you know, work with you with any questions you have. We will make sure that like I said, it was Senate Bill 1451. We'll make sure that that's posted on the website so you can see who both the Senate sponsors and the House sponsors were. It was Public Act 100-0585. That was the actual legislation that enacted the Small Wireless Facilities Deployment Act. But, you know, that's really all I have, you know, tonight. You know, it's one of those things where I know there's been a call to not act and a call to wait, but, you know, I think acting tonight on these guidelines gives us the most ammunition to sort of fight the good fight against this rollout of this technology, while at the same time putting us in a position to revisit these guidelines if you can get some type of movement downstate to amend the law, one way or another, we can come back and revisit these guidelines.
And we've been on borrowed time, hasn't it been since
Right.
August?
Since August, we've been, we've been dealing with, a permit looming over our heads that we've been trying to push off so it doesn't get filed.
We either act to get this resolution in place and get our aesthetics, whatever we can do about it, or it's gonna be put upon us without any
Or if
choice.
the permit is filed, then we will not have any regulatory capacity whatsoever.
And that could be any day, soon?
Yes.
We don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to add also that somebody had stated that they might be going on ComEd polls, and we did talk to Commonwealth Edison. They are not going on ComEd polls because they can't have anything above their equipment, because otherwise they have to de-energize the entire pole while they're doing maintenance. So there is nothing going to be above their equipment there. So, and also, yes, we have companies that are calling me all the time about permits.
Any questions from trustees on this subject?
Can I just ask, I was looking at the Public Act, it does have a sunset date. What does that mean?
That means that it could expire unless the legislation is renewed.
And if there's public outcry, is there a chance that it could be
It-
repealed in
it could be repe-
2021?
Yeah, it could be repealed,
Okay.
but the problem is, we're working within a 2-year window that, these cell companies are anxious to roll out
Right.
5G.
Right, well before 2021.
Well before 2021.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you. Trustee
That would
Terrell?
complete my report.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Attorney Jerusik, for both of your reports this evening.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now I will open the meeting back up to citizen comments regarding specifically the 5G cell towers. Mr. Vespa. Good evening.
I guess there's not a lot of information on our website about this, so just a couple questions to ask. 5G technology is very different than 4G and 3G and its predecessors due to the bands that it operates with and the power that's available to it, which means you have to have much closer proximity of these wireless antennas in order to create a complete network in an area. As you're looking at ways to put regulations in place around the aesthetics of how they can do this, do you have any information that you can share as to, with the number of wireless companies that are out there, and this is going to be a very competitive market, how many of these we can anticipate as it rolls out that will be across the village? Now, some experts have said that when you roll these out in municipalities, and there's been some examples of this, you need them almost every 500 feet or 10 houses to create a complete network. So what input does the village have around this? And as you think about the resolution, while I understand the importance of passing it, have you thought about the aesthetics with 4 or 5 or 6 companies coming in and putting in these devices? I mean, we have a very nice looking town. This could become aesthetically displeasing.
Absolutely.
To the town when they do it. And then my other question is you just mentioned that ComEd poles will not be used. So do you have any information about where they will be placed or how they will be placed? Are they putting in new poles? My block doesn't have any street lights. So when you don't have a street light or something of that nature that can be used to place them, how do you anticipate placing them? And then again, goes to the aesthetics of the neighborhood. So appreciate any feedback you have on the number of devices that will impact our village. And also, how are they going to be placed when you don't have an existing structure available? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'll ask Attorney Jerusik to address that. I know staff has discussed this as well as the committee.
Yeah, one of the challenges is the state law allows the individual carriers to put up their own infrastructure. So you're looking at there isn't the ability to require co-location to force all the users on one, monopole. Again, a limitation that's that we have to deal with at the local level based on the state law that was enacted down in Springfield. You are correct in your distance, requirements. What we are being told is the separation is between 300 to 500 feet, but they think with current technology, they don't want to put up more poles than they have to, right? That it's a 500-foot roughly spatial, separation. We're also being told that for the equipment to work in an optimum fashion, I think Ms. Hanson, you had indicated that they could go as low as 12 feet from the ground. They are being rolled out at a height of about 35 feet because that is the optimum sweet spot for them to all communicate, up and down street corridors and vis-a-vis trees, so you don't have tree canopies, in the way. So that's what we're hearing. We're hearing 500 feet separation between poles. The antennas they want at a height somewhere north of 30 feet in the 35-foot range.
The design standard that says 12 feet, the one you're adopting today.
Yeah, that design standard, when it talks about 12 feet, is talking about, yes, correct. Shall be mounted no less than 12 feet above ground level, their antennas.
And that's what we can do.
Correct.
Under the act.
Under the act, correct. That's the maximum we can do.
But we have heard from the companies, from one company, that for these to work, there's they have to talk one to the other, these small cell towers, and so they can't have interference, and I'm certainly no expert, but that the optimal height is 30 to 40 feet to have this talking from one tower to the other.
Yeah, the sight line.
And it's
issue.
a directional frequency.
How tall are most light poles?
Oh, about
15 feet?
20 feet, right? Matt, most light poles are 20?
Well, the central business district light poles are typically around 16 feet or so. A few of the ones near the railroad tracks are slightly higher than that. ComEd poles, for a frame of reference, are typically in that 30 to 45-foot range.
Oh, okay, that's helpful reference.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
In determining where these poles would be, could we require the companies to add any lighting if there isn't any lighting there?
That is what we've done in our design guidelines, is try to enhance our ability to get street lighting as a complement to putting up the poles.
Great.
We may get pushback on that because that's not in the state law, but we have made that push in our guidelines to try to make some type of lemonade out of the lemons.
That's an important aspect.
Yes.
I'm not asking for conjecture here, but in the event that these multiple companies come and say, we want to put up our own poles, how likely is it that they could be convinced to share one pole since they're up 30 feet in the air? And I don't know if they'd interfere with each other's signals, but is that something that we could do?
That will be explored at the staff level aggressively, is to minimize the number of pole placements throughout the community and the number of poles installed in the community.
The alternative being, we'll just have a pincushion full of these things, and we'll have to wait for the law to be repealed, and that could be years, or amended. Could the Springfield
Right.
legislation be amended to prevent that sort of thing?
Certainly, and this is, again, I think, an unintended consequence of legislation that got pushed through without maybe, thinking through, the local impact,
yeah.
right?
The pincushion.
Mm-hmm.
The pincushion
They didn't
effect,
think
which
of
is an
it.
excellent way to think about it.
Right. Yes. Oh, no, he's bringing you the microphone. Thank you.
No, people at home need to.
And the people at home need to hear, and they can only hear through the microphone. Thank you, Dan. And I'm sorry I made you come up to the podium before.
Yeah.
Happening. Hello?
Hi.
Testing? Okay, thank you for this. And I have heard, and I wonder if you have heard the same thing, that they're coming to Hinsdale and Western Springs before they're coming to other towns in Illinois, that we are getting the first wave. Have you heard anything along those lines?
The only thing I heard anecdotally is that they are going to communities where they know the demand for 5G will be prevalent. And so, they believe that Western Springs and Hinsdale both will be wanting 5G. Our residents will be wanting it.
And because we're a wealthier community and we're more likely to want to buy something more expensive, I guess.
That I couldn't say.
Okay.
Ingrid, did you have something?
They did express that, and we have also seen them in LaGrange and also in Clarendon Hills, and then I believe on the North Shore too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Vespa. Thank you.
Can you just clarify, did you say that you can build within a resolution the ability to make them co-locate, or we do not have the ability to force them to co-locate?
We do not have the statutory authority to force them to co-locate, but we will aggressively try to convince them to do so.
So to the pincushion analogy, that is something that could occur?
Yes.
It's within the possibility, the realm of possibility, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Nope, don't worry.
Oh, yes. Hello.
Christina West, 1646th Street.
Hi.
We have two poles on our property, so
ComEd poles?
I'm concerned about, I guess I don't know if it's a wood pole, is that a ComEd pole?
Yeah, does it have the electric wires? It's in the back.
One's in the back and one's in the front.
Matt, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so typically anything in the village that is wooden would be a ComEd-owned pole. Some of those are streetlights by ComEd, and those would typically be out front. We have a couple different areas in town where some of the overhead utility lines are rear yard and some are front yard. The only poles that the village owns are decorative light poles, and you'll see those in the central business district and near the library.
Okay, yeah, they're not light poles. I guess I would just be curious if there'd be any way to try to opt out as a personal resident or to somehow express that I don't want this up on my property somehow?
That would be.
There is the ability for us to move a preferred location within a certain distance. So there is a little bit of flexibility of moving poles within the utility's preferred location, but we cannot block them from locating in an area where that's necessary for their, connectivity, infrastructure system to operate. But so there is a little bit of flexibility for us to push the location one way or another, and we will work with every resident to try to maximize or minimize the impact, on residents.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
I just wanted to also comment, if the sponsors of this bill hear enough comments from residents and complaints and so forth, then maybe we'll have some action on it.
Mike, can I ask one point that I know you brought up earlier in our discussions of this, but there's certainly nothing to say that as technology improves, that these might become de minimis after a while, shrunk and disappeared, and maybe, am I right?
You're exactly right. And actually, when we first talked about this with our municipal clients, the PowerPoint contained pictures of the small cell facility themselves. And honestly, at that time, they were placed on light poles and utility poles. And when you looked at them, you said to yourself, "Oh, that looks like a microwave," hanging off the side of the pole. And now they are much more linear, much more whip-like. They are much more canister-like. Much more smaller in their size and their scope. And so I think that trend will also, continue where, things get more compact, they get more aesthetically, either pleasing or aesthetically, you're able to conceal them better, within, the areas that they're going to be posted.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Thank you for the report. Thank you, Trustee Terrell. Now we'll move on to, back to the agenda, following the agenda for item number 2, Properties and Recreation Committee, Trustee Chen.
Okay, thank you. So we met earlier this week, the Properties and Recreation Committee, and we went over line by line the 2020 draft budgets for both the Recreation Department and the village properties, and that includes Village Hall and other village properties, and importantly, the historic water tower. And I understand that the budget process is ongoing, and we will be continuing to review with the board and staff the budgets. The second item that we talked about at the meeting, we had two representatives from the Tollway come and present some design schematics for a proposed pedestrian bridge. As we've discussed earlier in this meeting, the current pedestrian bridge will be taken down during construction. The two designs that were presented to us, we were told were in the Tollway right-of-way. The northern, and our representatives will go over this tonight as well, the northern option would need to be taken down throughout the 4-year construction. The 47th Street option could be built earlier and sooner and be up during construction. The things that we talked about in committee were that we definitely need to seek input from residents, and we're going to work with the Tollway on a survey or other means to get input from the entire community about how, you know, a pedestrian bridge would be beneficial to the entire community. We're going to try to get a count of usage on the current bridge. We want to talk to our law enforcement about public safety concerns, which have been also brought up this evening. So those are some of the things that we talked about in committee, and I know they've been echoed by residents that are here. You know, and we talked about sort of the pros and cons of both of them and their connectivity for our community. I know that the Northern Bridge, as it's been discussed, is used for Whole Foods and accessing northern parts of Hinsdale. Also, I observe people using 47th Street, and I have concerns about people that are using that bridge. So we discussed that. So I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the Tollway.
Yes.
Yeah, to talk more about the specific design of the two proposed proposals for the bridge.
So, welcome Rocco Zucchero from the Tollway. Thank you for your
Thank
patience.
you very much. Yeah, Rocco Zucchero with the Tollway.
And we also have,
And Bridget Malinowski. Bridget is with our design team, design coordinator manager. So yeah, thank you for the update. So I'll just step back and thanks for having me here again today. So this is really kind of a follow-up from our agreement that we executed a few months back, where the Tollway, we've committed that we're going to replace a bridge. A bridge within the community. It's really the opportunity to get some feedback from the communities of Western Springs, Hinsdale, and the Western Springs Park District. We've been in discussions for several months. We've come up with some different options. What we want to walk you through today are a few different things that we've come up with. But like I said, we're committed to replacing the bridge. It's really the location of it. It's up to the communities to give us that feedback, and we are going to proceed with the survey. That should be out hopefully later this week. Online
Great.
type of survey, yeah. So it's pretty much ready to go. So we'll have some signs posted at the bridge. We'll add both bridges at the existing bridge, and then also down at 47th Street to elicit some feedback to make some informed decisions. So we'll talk through some of these options. But our Tollway goal is to make sure that we design and build a bridge that fits within our existing right-of-way. We've already had some right-of-way challenges throughout this entire project. And we will make it ADA compliant, so we really looked at the land that we do have on both sides of where we could put something in. Making it Americans with Disabilities Act compliant really requires stretching the bridge out. That's why we had to have some of the switchbacks. So our road's getting wider, so we had to make the bridge longer, but then also right now, as you know, it's a very steep incline going up the bridge. So what we have here on both sides is kind of just what it looks like on the Hinsdale on the left. It depends which way we're looking. Yes, Hinsdale on this side, or Western Springs on the east side. Obviously, you can see the switchbacks. The numbers that we have on the exhibits, you may not be able to see them. They're really some of the offsets from the different homes and facilities through there. You can see anywhere from about 55 to 130 feet or so to the front of the door. So we want to kind of give that perspective of what that footprint would mean to keep the bridge at the existing location. I think we have some renderings too. You can grab the clicker from Mike.
Here you go.
Oh, it's right here.
All right, thanks. Let's see what we have next. So again, you can see this is the existing bridge location. We've got a few different shots that I'll show you different locations of where we have these renderings and the different offsets. So this is the existing bridge as it is today, where, you can see it's a steep incline through there. We can't replace this without requiring significant amounts of right-of-way on either side, given the steep incline through there. This is a view looking from, what do we see? This one's the...
It's the Hinsdale side, I believe.
Oh, the Hinsdale side, sorry, yeah, you can see, and actually, there's a, on the Hinsdale side, there's a pretty, significant size wall, that would be required. You could see what the switchback would look like on the Hinsdale side to really fit everything in with the existing right-of-way that we have through there, and the homes is very tight. You can kind of see where that switchback would fit. The heights we show on there at the bridge, right where it comes over the noise wall on the Hinsdale side, it's about 22 feet. And obviously it scales back down to, to ground level. But at the cul-de-sac on the south side, it's about 16 feet high of a wall. So it is, it's a pretty imposing structure. So we wanted to get feedback from both sides. We'll focus, again, this is kind of what it would look like, walking up what the wall would look like. Again, this is another shot from, this is the Hinsdale side. Again, more what that would look like in the cul-de-sac on Hinsdale. I'll focus more on Western Springs again. Shot at Hinsdale. Again, it's a pretty imposing structure, that's for sure. Again, we want to get some feedback. So on the Western Springs side, now I'll focus on here. We do have a little bit more land, and we have a berm to work into, so it's a little bit more of a gradual slope. We don't have those big retaining walls that you saw on the west side of the road. Again, we could work within the existing topography of the land that we have through there, and again, you can kind of see where that switchback gradually brings you up to the height to get over the tollway. Generally, it's a prefabricated type bridge that we're looking at in this location.
Rocco, what's that span, the longest span in the middle section? Do you know that offhand about?
Obviously, 6, 20, 12 says, what's that? That's 72, probably close to 200 feet-ish, right, Bridget? I did some quick math. 6 times 12 is 72. Don't make me do math in front of a crowd.
And so late at night, too.
It's long. The engineer says it's long.
It looks long. I'm trying to get an idea, yeah.
So, yeah, it's about 100 feet on either side from the center.
Okay, thank you.
Give or take.
Rocco, how far are the homes in Western Springs?
We'll go back to that really quick. I think that was on the first exhibit. What's that? Yeah, if you can, I would not be able to do anything. So, yeah, thanks. So it varies, from it's about 130 feet to the front, or to the back door, about 47 feet from the backyard property line. At the north end, about 50 feet, so about 50 feet to the property line. And about 100 to the...
And if you can just take that pointer and just go along the...
Show what, yeah.
Show how it goes.
So there's about 47 feet from where this switchback would be to the property line. I'm guessing that's about where the property line would be, 47 feet. All the way to the front, to the back door, it's about 131 feet. And down on the south side, it's about 53 feet. All the way, 53 feet to here, and about 93 feet to that, to the back door.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll get it.
When I'm looking at the switchbacks, it looks like there's extensive chain link fencing around it. Is that, I'm sure for safety reasons.
Right.
But it doesn't look, at least on the Western Springs side, it looks relatively flat there?
If you
we
go-
do have more grade to work with on the Western Springs side.
Well, it just seems like there's so much chain link, it's almost like you're entering a jail, that you're kind of going through there.
I think it's on another slide, if you keep going there, that's it. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. But it,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's more about the location. Yeah, stuff like this would get,
gotcha. I could see if there's a drop off that you would need some kind of fence.
So again,
And what if Western Springs wants it one place and Hinsdale wants it another place?
Well.
We call that Tuesday. That's something that I think that the communities are working towards, trying to figure that out, getting the feedback, and that's why I think the survey is going to help provide some responses. So, you know, we really want to get that feedback. I think the communities want the feedback. We're going to look at the two communities, the Western Springs Park District, to provide that direction to us. Again, we're willing to put it either in the existing location or put something into 47th. We have done public meetings in the past, obviously several times, and we've heard from other public meetings you really should put a bridge to connect the two parks. So this was the opportunity to kind of before we make something permanent, let's get the feedback from the community. So I've got full confidence that we'll get to some resolution between the parties involved with the feedback we could get from the surveys as well. You know what, I have to say this too, from a decision timeline, we're looking to get a decision by December. That's why we want to try to get something sooner rather than later. That's the reason we want a December decision is to make sure that we have ample time to design a bridge and put something in place sooner rather than later. We do have opportunities with the bridge. So if we replace the bridge here at Maple and Mineola at the existing location, the bridge will be down for an entire year, construction season. We'll have to replace it in kind through there. If we put something at 47th Street, this is kind of what that would look like. This does give us the opportunity to put something in before the old one, or before one would get taken down. It really is dependent on the decision, though, on the timeline of it, a prompt decision, so we can design it, get whatever we need ready, and do the construction. So this, you know, it gives us different opportunities. So this is the 47th Street location. You know, I'll say this about 47th. We've heard a lot about the safety issues. We're not, the tollways, we're not touching the 47th Street Bridge. Our construction here is done. We don't need to do anything on the top of the bridge. So what you see here today, 47th Street is what it is. Unless, I don't even know who has jurisdiction of 47th Street. So we're not doing anything that would really touch the 47th Street Bridge to allow us to put in some additional accommodations for pedestrians, bikes and pedestrians. But what we're looking at here at 47th is a parallel bridge, really, again, connecting the parks. This is Spring Rock on this side, back on this side. The bridge would be parallel to 47th Street, go up and over the tollway. We either have one long bridge going up over the tollway and Flag Creek, or two bridges, touch down over here, and then go over Flag Creek. This is from the Hinsdale side looking east. This would be the other side, from the Spring Rock Park, looking back west over to Hinsdale. So you kind of see how they're two parallel bridges in this location.
And then you tie into that path, obviously.
You would tie into the path.
Right.
So the path is just off the map, but you can kind of see the dotted lines that we have there. That is existing tollway right-of-way out this location. So we do have some room through here. I think we might need a little something in the park to tie back into the path if we want to extend it that way, instead of having to do any kind of switchbacks like that.
Okay.
So this is what it would look like at the other location.
So just a question. So from the 47th Street, there is no work that's going to be done on that bridge whatsoever?
No.
It's got enough room underneath?
We did some minor repairs there last year underneath the bridge, and that's it. With the bridge itself, if you drive underneath it, we could cut back the walls underneath it to get the lanes through it. So it's already set. So we're not touching the top of the bridge. Relatively new from, I think, the 90s. It's only when that one was built.
Excuse me, Matt, may I ask you, whose road is 47th Street?
47th Street's owned by IDOT. The village does
IDOT.
have a maintenance agreement for the surface level of it,
Okay.
but presumably the bridge, any sort of reconstruction would be an IDOT.
Thank you.
So this is the last slide that I have. Really, it's we wanted to present this to you to kind of start getting some feedback. As I said, we'll have a survey. Thank you very much for the comments on the survey. The survey is really trying to find out, who uses the existing location, who uses 47th Street. Preferences, get some feedback on how often they use it, what they use it for, recreational purposes, school purposes, what and what not. So then we're going to be looking back to the boards, to both boards,
Okay.
Western Springs, the Park District, and then also Hinsdale, to give us some feedback and some direction by December. Again, to make sure that we have ample time to get something put in place, make decisions. Anything that I missed, Bridget? Any other questions?
All right, well, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you very
you
much.
for waiting to present, appreciate it.
It's always fascinating.
I have a question, President Gallagher. Are we thinking about having a public hearing on this to allow a more expansive number of villagers to come, or are we just gonna rely on the survey?
Well, have you discussed this in committee,
I mean,
Nicole?
we discussed
Yeah,
it a
we-
bit. We were hoping that the committee would be the survey would be widely available to residents. It should be if it's a online survey.
Yes, it is. It will be an online survey that the Tollway is doing. It's a Survey Monkey. And then we will have information in Village Hall, asking people to make sure that they do that. We'll put it online also to encourage
Yeah.
people to do that. And then we also are going to be doing counts by the bridge over there too, so to see how much it is utilized and so forth.
We'll have to make sure we well publicize the fact that the survey's out there so that we get as many residents weighing in that want to, so make sure that everyone who wants to weigh in knows about it. So we'll use our multiple outlets to get the word out.
Okay.
Are you okay with that? Yeah.
I just don't know if we were just gonna rely just on the survey, or whether or not we would have, like, tonight we had a lot of villagers come in, and I thought that was informative, but
Right.
it may be because they're the ones who live over there, and I didn't know if we're looking for something more wider, in addition to the survey, but
Right, we're hoping the whole community weighs in on what their preference is.
Okay.
How do you count usage?
The clicker?
Engineer Ziegler, how do you count
a
usage?
Camera. I think it's a camera.
It might be a camera.
That counts.
Pardon me, what was the question?
How do you count usage?
Oh, count usage on the, so we're gonna go use something called MyoVision, which is a video equipment that actually does survey by video. And you take that data, the whole video data, and then send that off to MyoVision, and they process the video, and then they'll be able to provide us the data for people coming, traveling eastward or westward, however we'd like the data counted.
And this is gonna be done soon?
Yes, as soon as the weather's going to permit, we plan on doing a 4-day count, at least according to Director Supert and my conversation today. Looks like we're gonna try and do a 4-day count, but I'd like 4 days of good weather. It would make no sense to have
Right.
something.
It doesn't seem fair to do it
Right,
if
and so we're looking
weather's not
for
good.
it could happen as early as this Thursday.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, I suppose that concludes my report.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Chen. Moving on to Public Works and Water Committee, Trustee Fink.
Start with the capital summary report. So well 5 drilling is complete. Right now they're pumping and flushing the water out, and they're gonna look at water quality and output is the goal by the end of the week, just to see output capacity, to make sure that meets the water needs of our village. The next part of that will be phase 3, where they're gonna be opening up the bidding for the electrical and pumping equipment, and that'll happen around the end of this month. And if anyone is interested in the water reports, they're at wsprings.com/well5. So the well is one part, and it's the transmission main is the other part. So they were holding off on opening up Hillgrove Avenue until the school is closed, and that's happening this week, just for the ease of the school closure. And they're, so it'll be parts of Hillgrove will be closed for this week intermittently, and Hillgrove should be repaired in the next 10 days. So the standpipe by Mariano's and LT High School, that the interior work is completed and the exterior sandblasting and painting is underway. So right now it's kind of under plastic for that work to be done. The roadway, the 2019 roadway program, the reconstruction, the roadway referendum. So there's 2 parts. One is the Clausen Avenue, and that is from Ogden to 41st Street. So that, the east lane is completed, and the west lane is still closed, and this week they're gonna be pouring the curbs and the driveways, and that's gonna have to cure for about 10 days. The other part of this, the roadway part, is Lawn Avenue. So that, the east side is curing right now, and that'll be tested to make sure it is safe, and as soon as that's closed, they're gonna start working on the west side. The 2019 motor fuel tax, so this, it's starting this week. So right now, they're doing the spot repair of the gutters and the curbs, all the cement work, and then the asphalt work will happen after that. So that the roads are going to stay open during construction, and it should be done by the end of this month. And next, for the roadway, 2020 roadway projects. So one thing that is happening, the Municipal Services Department is performing a request for qualifications for project engineering services. So that's pretty much the village's way of having a Rolodex of people to call in different engineering groups to send things out to bid. And so that is kind of a long process just because it's going to take reference checks and interviews that are going to be happening with that. And we have some recommendations. So the 2020 Clausen Avenue reconstruction. So this is, we're recommending Baxter and Woodman to approve Baxter and Woodman's proposal not to exceed $82,200. And then a phase 3 project will happen in this fall. And the other project is the Prospect Avenue reconstruction, and we're recommending HR Green's approval for phase 2 and phase 3 engineering not to exceed $146,829. And finally, the well 3 report. So this summer, well 3 went down and had to have emergency repairs. And finally, we have the invoice for that. And we're recommending the approval of $142,024 to pay that invoice. And lastly, we also reviewed the budget for works and public works, and we recommend that to be approved as well.
Okay, thank you.
So those other items will go to the omnibus?
Yes,
That is
we will put the items that trustee Fink referenced that they've recommended on the omnibus for next week for full board consideration and potential approval. One of those items, the Baxter and Woodman Engineering, I just wanted to say that's for the Clausen Avenue, the second phase, correct, Matt, of Clausen Avenue? And that will be from 41st to Hillgrove, I believe?
Correct.
Okay.
I ask one thing about the Prospect Avenue project. It says that that proposal included green infrastructure. I was just wondering what that is. Is that-
Matt, do you want to address
Yeah,
that?
so the proposal, we're looking
Yeah.
into various green infrastructure
Yeah.
opportunities for various road projects we have within the community.
Yeah.
We have had a kind of preliminary just sit down with HR Green. Prospect Avenue itself may or may not be feasible. We are looking at some other projects for 2021 as well that might have some green infrastructure projects. So it's something we're moving forward with on some of road projects moving forward.
Okay. So that didn't have anything to do with the underlying water infrastructure on Prospect?
No, that
Okay.
specifically is not a water. It would be
Okay.
mostly a stormwater related.
Okay, so that was what that was referencing. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of trustee Fink or Director Super?
I had a question about well number 3 and the report, specifically about the airlines, that the airlines were not working properly. I'm sure I'm using the wrong terminology.
Sure.
But if you can just clarify, because it said there were 2, and one of the recommendations, and then the subsequent repairs were that they put in 4, and so
Right.
just curious what that.
So that was not directly related to the issue we had. The
Okay.
issue we had with the well was an electrical failure. The airlines we found, so there's multiple airlines that are sent down into the well for redundancy. We found as part of the process after we pulled it that, as you know, 2 of them were not fully operational. The airlines essentially would allow us to measure the water level down
Yep.
in the well.
Yep.
So we measure it in feet. Actually, it's feet above sea level, so 642 feet, for example. And it uses air pressure to measure that height. So that's sent back up to the surface where we have a gauge that measures air pressure. That's essentially what those are, is allow us to measure what the aquifer levels are down below.
Okay. I'm still curious as to what caused the failure, and just wondering if the air pressure or changes in that could have done anything with the pump and the cable.
Right. I don't.
Again, I'm
yeah,
not an expert.
Yeah, no, the part of the cable that did have damage is submerged, and it's a submersible cable. So the level of the water wouldn't really impact
Okay.
that or to the air cabling system. It really just allows us to read what the levels of the aquifer are
Okay.
for those air cables.
Okay, thank you. That's it, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else, trustee Fink? That's it. All right, thank you very much. Moving on to planning and zoning, trustee John.
Nothing for me.
Okay, thank you. That was fast. Moving on to finance, trustee Rudolph.
I'm going to be almost as fast. Just noted, as some of the trustees have already noted, that the 2020 budget process is underway and that we have had some reviews by committee so far, and those will continue. The full board will see the first draft of the 2020 levy at our 2019 levy, sorry, for 2020, at our November workshop. So that is forthcoming. And then just also of note, the Finance Committee will still be meeting later this month on October 25th. I don't have any further report, so almost as fast. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Rudolph. And we'll move on to consideration of an action on our agenda item related to the special meeting portion of our combined meeting, and that's Resolution 19-2508. Trustee Terrell, will you motion that up, please?
Yes, I do. I would have a motion to adopt the written design standards for small wireless facilities.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? We've already had quite a bit of discussion this evening. Clerk Horvath, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Madam President. Trustee Terrell.
Aye.
Trustee Zifferman.
Aye.
Trustee Rudolph.
Aye.
Trustee John.
Aye.
Trustee Fink.
Aye.
Trustee Chen.
Aye.
Resolution passes.
Thank you. We have no other this evening, so we'll move on to the reports. First up is my report. I received notice from PACE that they're considering discontinuing Route 669, which provides service along Wolf Road from our southernmost boundary to the train station. PACE will be holding a public hearing regarding this potential discontinuation from 4 to 6 p.m. on October 24th at the Howard Moore Community Center, 7640 Jackson Boulevard in Forest Park. If this potential discontinuation affects you, please make plans to attend that meeting and voice your concern. The joint West Central Municipal Conference Transportation Committee meeting was held on September 25th. That committee is chaired by Northlake Mayor Jeff Sherwin and myself. At that meeting, we received updates on status of grants and other projects for the region, including a few Western Springs projects, specifically for the West Underpass, Central Avenue, and the Bemis Woods Bike Pass. I'm passing around some information on the projects that are that have already received grant funds and just on their status and expected completion dates. I want to thank all senior staff and trustees for your preparation and frank discussion during our annual review and revision of the board's established strategic goals that was held on September 26th, but already feels so long ago. The board looks forward to quarterly updates on those goals, and I especially want to thank Chief Bubbs for sharing his birthday with us as we plan Western Springs' future. So thank you, one and all. On October 4th, I attended Metra Symposium on Railroad Safety Awareness, and I'm passing that around too. Metra is partnering with Operation Lifesaver to improve public outreach efforts regarding trespassing and how to avoid injury and death on the railroad. Metra is also training employees and working internally to improve its public awareness program for the future. I hope everyone had a chance to visit the fire station on October 7th, where the annual open house took place. As always, there was a great turnout, and it was so nice to see our younger residents enjoying the rides in the fire trucks or sliding down the fire pole. So thank you, Chief, and thank you to your entire department for holding that. It's a great community event and gathering, and we appreciate it. Finally, I'd just like to say Happy Halloween. Please drive carefully, right? Or do we have another? Oh, we have another meeting before that. All right, then I'll withhold it. But I do want to say, and I will say this now and at our next meeting, we are starting a first inaugural pumpkin composting event at the rec center.
Pumpkin Smash.
Pumpkin Smash at the rec center on November 2nd. So please bring your unadorned pumpkins after Halloween to the rec center in the morning. I think it's from 9 to noon, or Sue, 9 to 12. Please bring your pumpkins with your styrofoam, and we'll have a good time smashing the pumpkins. And that concludes my report. Yeah. Thank you. Manager Velkman.
Thank you, President Gallagher. As you know, our staff has been very busy with budget meetings and also committee meetings, so that has been our main focus. I did have an opportunity to attend a seminar that was on cannabis that was hosted by the Illinois City Managers Association and also the Illinois Police Chiefs Association. Director Buds, Director Bear, and also Assistant Director Bernacki also attended with us. There are a lot of policy issues that we are going to have to review with regard to our employee manual and so forth, and so this cannabis legislation has a far-reaching effect. As usual, when we have something new imposed by the state, we always have something that we have to react to. So we are getting ready for that. And also, I would like to encourage our residents to please subscribe to the community alerts. That's where a lot of our information comes out. We also send out a board meeting agenda every 2 weeks. It's all online, and if you have any questions, just give us a call. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Jerusik, I know you've already given 2 reports. Here's a third. Thank you.
Third is the charm. Very briefly, we had a joint board of review meeting last Thursday, October 10th, which is the organization or the body that reviews the formation of TIF districts. That body reviewed the formation documents for the Western Springs Downtown North TIF district that the village is proposing. The board did make a recommendation and take a vote on it to have this village board move forward with the formation of the TIF district. We have a recommendation document that we will make sure you get a copy of, and everything else with respect to the TIF in terms of the schedule and the timing is still status quo. We will have a public hearing before this board on the formation of the TIF on November 11th, your first board meeting of November, and then we would anticipate an action date at your second board meeting in December. So everything's status quo. And then there was a closed meeting session for tonight. It's my understanding we will not need to go into closed session tonight. So my report's done, and I don't believe we have anything else to deal with tonight.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for that report.
Yep.
And in that case, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd have the motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ladies and gentlemen, we stand adjourned. Good evening.